Hello, welcome to the Indigosprites stitching podcast. Yes, after the last video I did, I was debating about whether or not to continue as a general craft podcast. My name is Sue, by the way, and I'm coming to you from Eastbourne on the south coast of England. I have problems with my neck. I suffer from degenerative disc disease, DDD it's otherwise known as, and knitting and crochet, particularly crochet, aggravate it like nobody's business, and can actually put me out of action for a couple of days at a time. So I have to go very slowly, and it makes it very difficult to get enough content to warrant a general craft podcast. Stitching doesn't have the same effect. Hand stitching, I'm a hand stitcher, don't particularly like machines, probably because I've never really got my head around them. Did use them when I was at school, but that was the last time I used one. But I do prefer hand stitching, so this is a stitching podcast now. I did mention last time I might have to drop the knitting and crochet side of it, and for the sake of my health I had to, but at least I've still got stitching. Hey, at least I've still got that, eh? So it's not just cross stitch, although it will be cross stitch will be a large part of it. I also do other hand stitching pieces. I am hand stitching a quilt at the moment, which you will get to see the progress of that later on. I do a stitching craft called Brick and Stitch, which you may or may not have heard of, but that will be shown later as well. And anything stitching related that catches my attention as I go, then I will incorporate it into my podcasts. So I will begin now. First with some cross stitch, and I have a finished piece here that I actually finished this week, and that is this. Yes, I've done my first Christmas card of 2019. My daughter gave me, this was a little Mouseloft kit. I might have mentioned it in the last podcast, but this is it completed. My daughter gave it to me as a stocking filler. It's by Mouseloft. I believe I put the details for Mouseloft in the descriptions box of the last podcast as well. It was a delightful little stitch, actually. I really enjoyed it. Took me a couple of evenings. I'm not usually a great fan of what I call messy backstitch. I find it quite confusing, but it didn't bother me on this one. It seemed fairly straightforward. And initially I put the craft sheets of peel-offs you can get from most craft shops. I peeled off some pretty gold, a pretty gold strip from some peel-offs that I got, and put it all the way around the outside edge, but it wasn't really sticky enough to stay, so I've removed it. And what I might do is put some embellishments or some glitter or something around the outside edge to completely finish it. The card came with the kit, and it usually opens out in 3, but once you've put the cross stitch, lined it up in the aperture, I use a strong tape gun to go around the outside edge, and then you can secure this down as well. And you also get here it is. You also get the envelope with the kit, like so. So apart from the embellishment, that is my first card ready to go at Christmas. I believe the thread was DMC stranded, and yeah, you do get a needle and all the thread and instructions with the kit as well. So that's that one. Now, in my very first podcast, which was quite some time ago, that was primarily stitching, and I also showed a way you could decorate your card using pretty napkins. Have you noticed there's so many pretty napkins you can buy in the shops now? Particularly Waitrose, they have some beautiful napkins. And I use a napkin to, you take it off in layers, and I just use one thin layer, so you get almost like a colour wash look. I think I used a napkin with tulips on it. You get it with all different coloured tulips on it, and you get this colour wash look, and you paste it. I used you can actually get napkin glue, and I paste it over the card, the card that I was using to mount my cross stitch on, and I'll show you how to do that. So I might occasionally show you how to do maybe a finishing for your cross stitch if you ever fancied doing your own. So a couple of these, I've got a couple of old finishes here as well, which I'll show you a bit later. But now the works in progress. Now this work in progress, I've had permission from my daughter to show, and it might look a bit strange at the moment, but this is a series of patterns she's coming up with. I can't actually show you the pattern. I don't have a finished photo because I haven't finished it yet, basically. I do the test stitching for her, and the pattern is going to be a series of patterns that are based on Alice in Wonderland. And I've already completed 3. This is the 4th. If I can get her permission, then I'll try and show you the finished 3 on the next podcast. And this particular one, as I said, is the 4th. I finished the background patterning on it, which I think is really lovely vintage feel to it. And the idea of these patterns is they're a series of Alice in Wonderland Assisi patterns, which is where the background is stitched, but the outline of the actual main feature of the stitching is left blank, or with just backstitch outlining what it's supposed to be. So I finished the background of this, and you may just be able to see there's no backstitch on it yet, but it is actually a set of 3 vintage teacups. So you've got 1, 2, you can just see the outlines of the little handles, and 3, and then there's the saucer balancing the 3 cups. Now when I've done the backstitch, it will look much more clear, and it's going to be once that's all backstitched as well, you can just see here that there are actually around the outside, oops, pick it up, around the outside edge of the background pattern are going to be 4 teaspoons, and you can just see one I've started. That's actually the handle, and you'll get the spoon shape here, and then that's going to be backstitched as well, and then you'll get another one there, another one there, and another one there. And I'm really excited about these. The very first one I did was, a keyhole. In a similar vein, it had a big keyhole in the middle, and a background pattern, and 4 gold keys around the outside. The second one was just the mouth of the Cheshire Cat and a bit of the background fur, and he was in, he looked like he was in or between a couple of trees in the forest, and looked amazing. I was really pleased with that. And the first one I finished in a flat fold style. The second one, the Cheshire Cat, I finished as a little hanging. And the third one, what was the third one I did? Was it the Mad Hatter? I think it was the Mad Hatter, actually. Oh yes, it was. And I mounted that onto a craft notebook. And as I say, I'll try and get them from my daughter and show the finished objects on the next podcast. And this will be finished by the time I do my next podcast as well, so you can better see. But they are all in the Assisi style, and a nice modern take as well, in my opinion, of the lovely timeless Alice in Wonderland. So that's that work in progress. Another work in progress which I have shown on one of my previous podcasts, and I haven't done a lot more to it since, but I will show it again for those of you who don't want to go back and look. And only briefly, again, this is actually shown on a previous podcast, and the finished picture is shown on a previous podcast, but this is Emma Congdon's, and it is When Life gives you lemons, make a G&T. I love that, and it's a beautiful picture with using beautiful colours, as you can see, and I'm only going to show that briefly. I've stitched it in DMC threads. It's usually they're my go-to threads, DMC, on I think this is a 16 count Ada, and it's got sparkle in it, because I thought it reminded me of the bubbles of the tonic. So I'm only going to briefly show that because I don't want to bore you too much with the stuff I've already shown before. So they're my two current works in progress. I do plan to start one or two more. I'll try not to keep jogging the table, actually. And actually in the Alice in Wonderland series I'm doing, there's going to be 13 in the series, by the way. I didn't mention that, but they are all stitched in DMC stranded cottons as well. And I'd really love to get my hands on some of the American Weeks Dye Works cottons, because they look so lovely, but we're a little bit limited, I think, over here in the UK. I believe the most common or the most easily available thread is DMC everywhere, and sometimes you can pick up Anchor, and more rarely you can pick up Madeira. So I tend to use DMC as my go-to. Right, now some older finished projects I will just show you briefly, or maybe not so briefly. This little one was in every season in the UK. We get a pack called Enjoy Cross Stitch, and in that pack is a magazine packed full of patterns and designs, and you get, usually I think it's around 10 skeins of thread all in different colours, stranded threads, all in different colours. You get cards for mounting your work, you get envelopes, you get a packet of embellishments to decorate your finished cards with, or your finished work with. And I really took to these lovely Wellington boots, and I just love that vintage vibe going on with the green background and the roses on those boots. Now there was different wording I can't remember what the original wording was down here, but I decided to change it to make a splash today. I didn't quite line the lettering up very well, but it's fine for what it is. And I plan to mount that and turn it into a card. Now, do you want to see the back of my work? Sacrilegious. That's the back of my work. Not the neatest, but not the messiest. I don't generally agree with worrying too much about the back of your work. As long as you're not tying knots and leaving it all lumpy on the back, then you're fine. And this particular design was from one of the Enjoy cross stitch packs, which come out 4 times a year: spring, summer, autumn, winter. I particularly love the autumn winter packs, but then I like autumn winter of everything better. I love the magazines with their lovely autumn winter cross stitch patterns at that time of the year. I'm just an autumn winter girl, really. I do like the sun, especially since I moved to Eastbourne. It's known as the sun trap of the UK, but I think we also need autumn and winter as well. I couldn't be an all year round sunshine girl, I'm afraid. So that's an old, which was probably shown on my very first podcast as well. But for those of you who don't want to go back, I'll just give you a brief idea of what I tend to like stitching a lot of the time. Now this one, I've always been fascinated by what you can do using just one colour. And just let the camera adjust there. Is it going to? It might be as good as it gets. And I saw this also in one of the Enjoy cross stitch packs. I've been buying the pack since they came out, so I've got quite a few now. And yeah, I've always been fascinated, even in other crafts like knitting. My speciality in knitting was cable knitting, and always been fascinated by what you can do with just one colour, particularly cable knitting, when you're just manipulating the stitches to produce an entirely different fabric with a big wow factor to it. But this is just one colour of stranded cotton, and I was fascinated by the pattern that came out with it. And you've got the Assisi version here where the background is stitched, and then you've got this version where the motif is stitched and the background left blank. And that again, I know Emma Congdon brought out a lovely summer sampler last year with only using 3 colours, which I have actually kitted up and planned to do. So perhaps I'll start that between now and the next podcast I do. But yeah, very, very simple but very effective, just using one colour and that motif. And this is another one of an old finish of mine. The last one I'll show you of the old ones. And this is one of Faye Whitaker's. Excuse me. Sorry, tried not to do that down the microphone. This is one of Faye Whitaker's, who is an artist based somewhere on the south coast, I believe, in the Brighton area. And a while ago now, her artwork has gradually been, some of her artwork has gradually been converted to cross stitch. And she specialises in these characters for a cross stitch, which are often, I think, mostly based on the seaside. And these are they Edwardian characters? I can't remember now. But anyway, Yes, they're very often children, based around a seaside theme in that same era. As you can see, these two are fascinated by the Punch and Judy show that they've stopped to watch. And again, I love this. I think it's delightful. I might finish this on a flat fold actually and see if I can get it done and show you next time. Yeah, there was a minimum amount of backstitch on this one, which was very nice. And some of it, like the stripes on the Punch and Judy stall, were only done in half cross stitch, and a little bit of the shadow on the ground where the children are standing. So I love that. I love the detail in it. And if you like Faye Whitaker's cross-stitch work, or if this is the first time you've ever seen it and you'd like to know more, I will also link her details in the descriptions box below, which is in the corner down here. Drop down arrow underneath the video where you're watching. Yeah, so I'll try and get that actually finished and show you again what it can look like finished. I'll try and do a themed finish as well, considering the seaside theme of the picture when I do my finish. Another thing about Faye Whitaker, I think that picture I just showed you was from a magazine, but she does have this book out. It's been out for quite some time. I don't think there's ever been a follow-up. Her entire range is called All Our Yesterdays, and this book is a cross-stitch collection of all these type of pictures. 33, as you can see, charming designs from bygone days. And that was they're designed by Faye Whitaker in association with DMC. And I can't show you patterns, but I can probably show you some pictures. You can see there, there's a traditional seaside theme there with the children filling their buckets. I actually did one of her bookmarks a long time ago. I don't know where it is. I know I've still got it. I am an avid reader. I love reading. Oops, I don't want to show the patterns. That page doesn't want to. Now this book, I know was at one time quite sought after. And I believe you can still buy it on eBay. There are still a few people who sell it on eBay. But I'll try and show you some of the solid pictures. And you can see they're all of a theme. Oops. But, oh, there's one that's not a nighttime scene. It's called Ready for Story Time. That's quite cute. Some more of the little ones. Back to seaside. School mistress taking the little girls out for a walk. It's the way they're holding on to each other's petticoats. That's so sweet. And absolutely beautiful these designs are. I love them. Just very quaint, bygone day, beautiful pictures. And Faye Whitaker did do a beautiful, it covers all the seasons. It seems to cover all the seasons here as well. But Faye Whitaker did a beautiful picture in one of the cross stitch magazines. Was it the Queen's Golden Jubilee? Or was it Diamond Jubilee? Can't remember now. But it was a beautiful picture which was also available in the World of Cross Stitching magazine. So that is her book, and as I say, if you're interested in that and would like a your own copy, then I have seen it on eBay, and I do plan to do more of her pictures. As well as this book, she has an awful lot of kits out of pictures that won't actually be in this book. This book is just a very small part of her work. So that's everything I've got to say about cross stitch today. Now a couple of other stitchy projects I've got on the go at the moment. Firstly, there's going to be a bit of rustling, so sorry about that up front. I'll just get a few of these out because that's not one of them. I've got a big bag full. I wanted to try some English paper piecing. Never done anything like that. I've stitched a couple of quilts by hand in the past. One of them was for my daughter's 21st birthday, which was about 16, 17 years ago now. And got slightly bent in the bag. I made her an Egyptian quilt because she loves the Egyptian era, and which she was absolutely stunned by in a good way. And I've also hand stitched a Christmas quilt, which is mine, and I use that regularly. I put a fleecy tartan backing onto it, and which is lovely for the colder weather. And I stitched a blanket. My daughter had some fat quarters and she didn't know what to do with them, so she sewed the fat quarters. She didn't cut them, she just sewed the fat quarters together to form a quilt. They were very large, so she managed to form a quilt for a double bed just by sewing these fat quarters together. And then I don't think she was particularly keen on doing the quilting, the sandwiching it together and the quilting afterwards, so I offered to do it for her and sandwiched it together and quilted the large panels for her. So I think that's about it. That's my hand quilting experience. So I saw English paper piecing came back in a little while ago, and I wanted to have a go of it. And mine have got a little bit bent up in the bag, but I've done a big bag full of these motifs, and there's a steampunk fabric in there, there's floral fabrics in there, all sorts. You know, there is quite a big mix, and I'm going to break them up by putting some plain ones in here and there. And I'm actually in the middle of piecing, of doing the tacking on those at the moment. And what I think I might do, because I've already stitched or tacked over 300 of the patterned ones. I've only just recently started the plain ones, but I think I worked out I needed about another 300 more for the quilt I wanted. I've got it written down somewhere, and so what I'll do is every so often I'll put a plain one in, and then once it's stitched together and the paper taken out of the back, then I'm going to embroider a little motif occasionally, randomly, on the plain. Not on every single plain one, but randomly on the plain ones they will have a little embroidered motif. So yeah, it started off a very random quilt. I didn't really have much idea in my head of what was going to happen once I started doing the paper tacking. I did take the easy way out and got a big bundle of hexagon paper shapes. I think they were 3-inch on eBay, and I think I got 2 lots actually, because I used up the first lot and then decided that I wanted to make a double bed quilt, and sent off for another lot, which you can get them at a very, very good price actually. I think they were less than £5 for a huge bundle like that. Might only have been something like £3, but I can't quite remember. So yes, that is going to be my English paper pieced quilt, the first one that I would have ever done. I have started putting a couple of them together. Once on Create and Craft I saw, if any of you watch the craft Selly Tellies, there's a lovely lady on there called Sarah Payne, who's a sewist extraordinaire, and she did paper piecing on English paper piecing on one of the shows, and she showed how to sew together your hexagon shapes securely, because if you just did a straightforward was it whip stitch or the over stitch, if you just did a straightforward over stitch all the way along, I've got those two together like that, then there was a risk in time, which I didn't know this. I'm glad I found out before I started sewing these together. There was a risk in time that one end would start loosening and it could start unravelling, but she showed a way to do it which I couldn't quite remember, unfortunately, and I hadn't recorded the show, but I do my own version where I come along a few stitches in and then go back a little bit and then back again, and that secures my ends, so hopefully will stop the chance of them unravelling in the future, because we all like to think that our handmade stuff becomes heirlooms, I guess. So that's I'm not following any particular instructions. I've seen how they do it on the TV. I just get a hexagon template, I draw around it on a piece of fabric, I cut probably a bit more than 1/4 inch. I'm always far too generous with my seam allowances. I cut it with a quarter inch edging all the way round, and then I fold the flaps over and just tack down. You can see the tacking better. I think I tack a bit too much. I use too many stitches, but I think that's me, and perhaps will relax with time anyway, although I don't seem to have done as many on some of them. So once you start sewing them together and you've got them together, then you can, I kept meaning to put a little nick in the back of the paper piece, so you can pull them out once the overstitching is done, because when you do the overstitching you don't actually catch the paper. So you put a little slit in your paper template, pull it out, and then you'll have your hexagon ready to go. So that's my English paper piecing work done so far. That's a long work in progress. Once I start piecing it together and have something more to show you, I will, but I won't necessarily update you every single podcast. So there we are. And I have some lovely fabric which I showed on my Aldi craft haul video, which was only 2 or 3 videos back. There's some lovely Pooh Bear fabric, 100% cotton fat quarters that I picked up in Aldi when they had their Mother's Day craft special, and I plan to do a similar thing to what my daughter did with her fat quarters and just sew them together as is, probably in a raggedy style. Oh, I have made a raggedy quilt as well. I nearly forgot about that. That's because I made a raggedy quilt and a while back, and that was all hand stitched, and that was a real labour of love. Absolutely loved it. But I showed my sister a picture of it, and she very kindly relieved me of it. I wasn't complaining. It's nice to give stuff like that, and she absolutely loved it. I believe her husband absolutely loved it as well. So I might do the Pooh Bear one in the raggedy style. I did like that actually. If you don't know what the raggedy style is, come back and you'll find out. Now, other stitching project. Another stitchy project I've got on the go at the moment is, just put that to one side for a minute. Mentioned at the top of the podcast, prick and stitch. Well, this is prick and stitch, and it is a form of embroidering cards. Now this is a picture of the finished thing, it's not an actual pattern, and the company is called Add Some Sparkle, and I first saw them on Hochanda, which is another craft Selly Telly channel, and fell in love with their products. And it's a little bit like, do you remember the what did you used to call it, those patterns we used to do at school, well, at least I did anyway, where you get the sort of webbing effect, but we used to just do them corner to corner. But this is something similar, but made up into beautiful pictures, which are in turn made up into beautiful cards. So I am doing my second Christmas card of 2019. And what you do, I'll just show you briefly, that you get a template like that which shows you all the holes. You get a pricking mat. This was with a certain kit that I bought from Add Some Sparkle, and you put your card on the pricking mat, and then you get your paper pattern, you put it over the card, secure it with a bit of what do you call it, masking tape, or if you feel confident, hold it in place, and you go round and you basically get your pricking tool, which I have the pricking tool here, which came as part of the kit. Has a protective cover there, However, you can use an ordinary dressmaker's pin, like that one, or a needle, but this came with the kit. So, and you just go around and you copy where there's a hole, you push your needle right through every single hole of the pattern. All this pattern is made up of lots of little holes. And on the pattern, I know he shows this on the television, so I'm sure it's fine, because I don't think it can actually be copied. You'll get little numbers like this: 1 to 10, 1 to 6, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, 1 to 15. And what that is, put that to one side now. Actually, I might use that for pointing, be easier. So where you come up, you come up in hole 1. So it was 1 to 10, this particular section. You come up in hole 1, and then you count, and that's is the first one number 1 or the next one number 1? I think the first one's number 1. So you count that as 1, and then you go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you go down at number 10. Then you come up at the next one, so that will be number 11, and you count 10 back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you go down next to where you first came up, and then you come up in the hole next to it, and then you count 10 and go down in number 10. So, and that produces, I don't know if the camera will focus any better on that, don't think it will, this lovely sort of spider's web effect. So you can see I've started that and I'm going up there, and each time you get, so I've started here, I've gone round there and up here, and then you have to be mindful of counting the correct stitches. So there's 1 in 6 there, 1 in 5, 1 in 15, 1 in 13 down here. You have to make sure you count the right amount of holes. That's the biggest, maybe that's the hardest thing, is making sure you keep the amount of holes correct. Now when you run out of thread and you have to re-thread, on the back of the card you just neatly, I've got some double-sided tape here, just taken a little bit off, and you just neatly put it over where your beginning thread starts. So if I say run out here and need to re-thread, I would just secure down with another bit of double-sided tape and then turn my card over and carry on. So once this Christmas tree is finished, I believe when I got this pack, I think it was all at the same time, I also ordered a pack of embellishments, because as you can see on the picture of the finished product here, you've got these little baubles hanging off a star there. And I also got a pack of embellishments. Would you like to see them? Just a moment. Just digging them out. Here they are. Can you see these lovely embellishments? And they're flat backed mostly, apart from those little bells there, which would look lovely on the top of the Christmas tree. And you've got some ribbons and some paper flowers. So I will use these, some of these, to put the baubles on my Christmas tree. All by the same company, Sparkle Stitch Cards. Actually, www.addsomesparkle.co.uk. I will put in the descriptions box below for you. But they do everything you could possibly need for this craft, and it's not a great deal, which is amazing. Now the thread I use, you can use any thread. You can use something like a stranded cotton, like I have just some on display there. But Add Some Sparkle also did this on one of the shows. I don't know if it's still on their website. It seems to be by a company called Joy Crafts. Now look at all these beautiful colours, all metallic threads. I must admit, anything, if I do prick and stitch, which is another not word, but another name for this craft, then I tend to like to use sparkle, at least some sparkle within the picture that I'm doing. I do love sparkle, but you've got all these different coloured metallic threads on spools in a pack, and I seem to remember it was very well priced at the time, but can't remember. It was obviously so good I can't actually remember what the price was. But yes, so Add Some Sparkle had these on Hochanda a while ago, and that is what I am actually stitching in the in this lovely greeny metallic, which is what I'm stitching my Christmas tree in. I will probably use an ordinary bit of stranded cotton for the bucket that the terracotta bucket that the tree is standing in, and then once that is finished I would just get a plain blank card to mount this on. Might have to trim around the edge a little bit to mount this on, and it'll be another finished Christmas card. Yo! So that is Prick and Stitch. There is a big company, as well as Add Some Sparkle, there is another big company out there called Formaline, and they do the most amazing Prick and Stitch patterns. I have several of theirs. They are also on the internet, very reasonably priced, their patterns, and for little more than a bit of card thread and a needle to prick your holes with, it really is a very economical craft. But Formaline, I will put the details in the descriptions box below. Now when Add Some Sparkle were last on Hochanda, they brought out their newest kit, which was only Sunday just gone, I think. Now they do quite a few of these different types of kits, and this has only just arrived really, yesterday I think it was, and it makes 8 embroidered cards. But let's see if I can get the camera to focus on this. It is a wild animal. Just about make out that panda there. Let me turn off autofocus, see if that helps. Might help a little bit actually. This is their wild animal pack. You've got a lovely tiger there. A wolf there. I don't think it likes all the shiny plastic, but I don't want to take it out just yet because I've only just got it. And a monkey and a koala, and yeah, their wild animal paper embroidery kit. Now they had this on Hochanda on Sunday, and you get this lovely green card to mount your work on. You get decoupage so that you can layer these pictures up. You get the patterns for doing the beautiful embroidery around the wild animal pictures. You get the lovely, you get the cards, the envelopes, the needle and pin, the patterns, the threads and the decoupage. All in this pack. And it says it makes 8 embroidered cards, but actually, as us crafters know, if you're very careful with what you do with your packs, you can usually make an awful lot more than that. So that was the Wild Animals paper embroidery kit. So maybe I hope I'll try and start, even try and make one between now and my next podcast so you can see the finished thing. One other incoming thing. Oh, actually I've had this a little while, but I haven't actually used any yet. I saw this beautiful thread, I think it was on Amazon actually, which I bought especially for Prick and Stitch because I do love that, absolutely love that craft. That one's come unravelled a bit. Put that back on. And these were I got from Amazon, and they were very, very good price. I think if I remember rightly, it was around £8 for all of this. Now some of it is, well, one or two are slightly tangled, but that's okay. It was an absolute bargain. It might not have been anywhere near as much, I'm just sort of playing safe, but I know at the time it was an absolute bargain. And I got all of these, which are sparkly. And with Prick and Stitch in mind. And just look at those colours, aren't they lovely? And there's a nice variety of colours there to cover most possibilities. And did I show this one came unravelled the most actually, but that is a gorgeous red. I think I've shown them all, have I? Yeah. But yes, that's by a company called Curtsy. And if they're still available, oh, they're on Facebook. Like us on Facebook for 10% off your next order. Ooh. And it gives you the details there. And it seems to be called Tiny Yo. Facebook.com/Tiny Yo. TINYYO. So again, I haven't used them, so until I use them I can't tell you how good they are, but I shall let you know. And that is the only other incoming goodie. Now, one thing about my podcasts, whether they're craft podcasts, stitchy podcasts, any podcast, I tend to be very random. One day I'll be saying works in progress, the next podcast I'll be calling it something else. I'm just a random podcaster, that's me. I don't follow a strict set of rules purely because my memory doesn't allow me to. So I doesn't matter what I call things anyway. The main thing is you get to see A, what I've made, B, where I've bought things from, and C, maybe even picked up some ideas as well, who knows. So but I just love the crafts I do. I love the sharing. I am heartbroken that I can't do as much knitting and crochet as I used to, but hey, your health has to come first, doesn't it? So I am carrying on with a little bit of knitting and crochet, but it's going to be very, very slow progress. I've got to use up my yarn haul somehow, even if it's very slowly. So now I'm off to read my latest edition of World of Cross Stitching, and that I got yesterday, and I will be back again soon with more stitchy stuff to show you, and hope you have a good couple of weeks before I see you again. And if you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and even share with any stitchy friends you know are out there. Thanks very much. See you again soon. Bye for now.